We were just outside of the Janjaweed commander's territory. The Janjaweed don't usually talk to journalists, but I'd heard this commander and his 20,000 men had fallen out with the Sudanese government and might be willing to talk. Over a satellite phone, they gave me a rendezvous point. We're just about to meet our escort car sent by the former Janjaweed commander. الحمد لله السلام عليكم ازيكم ان شاء الله طيبين الحمد لله كويسين الحمد لله تعبناكم معانا ما تكونوا استنيتونا كثير. This is the commander who's been sent to meet us. He told me that they'd fought against the rebels on the Sudanese government's behalf for 5 years, but received little in return. So their leader had decided to lift the lid on their relationship. Their territory covers most of southern Darfur. They had held it for the government, pushing back the rebels, but now they'd fallen out with the government. Already there had been clashes. They showed us the route to the garrison. Our escort says that this route is safe and that we won't be meeting any trouble, and they should know, because if we'd been traveling this route a few months ago, they were the trouble. We'd been driving for 2 days. They said the garrison was another 2 days north. Our escort was heavily armed for the journey. The machine guns got amulets with verses from the Quran, blessed by a local sheikh, and all of them are wearing them. What do these protect you from? They stop bullets. Said even if a spear comes right in, it won't pierce you. The Sudanese government has denied arming the Janjaweed, but these fighters said that wasn't true. They told me to look at where their weapons had come from. You can see on this box, just across here, it says Yarmouk Industrial Complex, which is the main government industrial armament complex, which is under US economic sanctions for involvement in the manufacture and shipping of arms to Darfur. One of the officers, Jafna al-Bakhit, says he was recruited by the government. So how are you recruited? يعني لما جو جندوكم جندت كيف انت؟ He says at the start of the conflict, government recruiters went around Arab neighborhoods, promising rewards for those who took up arms against the rebels. There was a rush to join. But he says these rewards, being looked after by the government and investment in Arab villages, never came. We were approaching a government stronghold. The men were worried government sympathizers might alert the army to our presence. Our escort have asked that my director be brought into the back seat next to me, and they've tried as best as they can to conceal the fact that he's white by wrapping him in one of their scarves. They stopped briefly to show us the aftermath of a recent clash with the Sudanese army. This is 20 kilometers from Nyala, from the government stronghold in South Darfur. They told us the government sent in planes to bomb them in revenge for their defection. He said his brother was killed here under the bombardment. He said that this is where someone else was killed. This is where the blood was. We didn't stay long. There's a Sudanese government helicopter that's been circling overhead. But once we're out of the circumference of Nyala, then we're hoping it'll be okay. Finally, they told us we were approaching the garrison. The garrison is just there. At first, all we could see were trees. Then we realized we were in a vast concealed camp. This is not what I expected at all. There are people sleeping under trees. There are people cooking and out in the open. It's not a conventional military garrison. They said 1,000 of their 20,000 men were based here. We've been told that the reason they chose this garrison is that unusually for this part of Darfur, there's a lot of tree cover, so that when government
aeroplanes fly overhead, the troops can move under the trees. Assalamu alaikum.
They were keen to show us their heavy weaponry.
So this is the remote, and then the numbers on the remote correspond with the numbers of the tubes for the mortar. You can see here that the mortars actually have Chinese symbols on them. They're Chinese made.
The Chinese government has been accused of flouting a UN arms embargo that bars the supply of weapons to groups involved in the Darfur conflict. China denies this.
More Chinese letters and other Chinese made. The Sini? Yeah, they say it's a Chinese gun. This is a Sudanese armed forces truck with what looks like an anti-aircraft gun on the back of it. He's going to jump up and show us how it works. Were you operating this when it was a Sudanese government gun? Well, he himself used it in battle against the rebels in North Darfur, but he said that he's now used this government gun against the government themselves, bringing down 3 government planes in their initial clashes with the government after they first defected.
The Sudanese government has denied arming the Janjaweed, but the men say they received weapons up until last October. We were told to wait at the edge of the garrison for the force's leader, Commander Mohammed Hamdan, but then we got word that he was having second thoughts about our filming.
We've just seen Commander Hamdan's car cross the riverbed.
We heard the government had started negotiating to bring the commander back on side. A delicate time, and not a good moment to go on the record about government backing for his forces. Incredibly, he still turned up.
عليكم السلام. Commander, زيك كيفك انت؟ الله يسلمك ان شاء الله انت طيب. This is Commander Mohammed Hamdan, the man we spent the last 2 weeks trying to meet.
Hamdan's men are accused of carrying out atrocities while allied to the government. Yet publicly, the powers in Khartoum have disowned them. He said he wanted to put the record straight. He said that in fact the government recruited him personally to fight against the Darfur rebels in 2003 and made his men part of the armed forces. If we wanted proof, he said we should look around at his men's weapons.
And he said to me, does it seem logical to you that we magicked these weapons in these brand new cars out of air? Of course the government gave them to us.
He says his orders came straight from the top.
Commander Hamdan said that he met the president of Sudan, President Umar al-Bashir, in his home in September of 2006, where he personally asked him to carry out campaigns in Sidr and Kariari in northern Darfur that had recently been taken by the Darfuri rebels.
These are the first direct allegations by a senior Janjaweed leader that his force was armed and controlled by the Sudanese government. It's what the international community has long suspected.